before John speaks, because he's going to be talking about brain function. This stuff is online. But I need to make sure I'm good here. What's the difference between gray matter and white matter?
Gray is found in CNS.
As is white. Okay. So it's part of the central nervous system. What's the difference?
The one's myelinated and one's not.
There we go. So
okay.
Which one do you think is myelinated?
The gray. The white.
Because myelin is fatty. So myelin is fatty like Crisco. So it's white. All right, now what part of the neuron is myelinated? We covered that last time. What part is myelinated?
The axon.
The axons. So the gray are the unmyelinated. I should probably put myelinated. Myelinated, unmyelinated axons. Dendrites. Cell bodies. And the glial cells. So white is just axons. The way the brain is structured, gray is on the outside, white's mostly in the middle. The way the spinal cord is constructed, gray is in the middle, white is on the outside. So we'll have differences there. Now, so you need to keep in mind, always keep in mind, white, myelinated axons. And then gray is everything else. Take that picture because I'm getting ready to do more here in a second. Got it?
Hold on. I got it.
Okay.
Somewhere in my video.
No, the horns are gray. Now we have some more terminology. Let's go ahead and get it out of the way. In the central nervous system, bundles of axons are called tracts. In the peripheral nervous system, bundles of axons are called nerves. Cranial nerves, spinal nerves, remember those from anatomy. In the central nervous system, collections of cell bodies are called nuclei, where that's plural, so nucleus is singular. In the peripheral nervous system, cell bodies are called ganglia, collections of cell body. That's plural, so ganglion is singular. So we've got our terminology there. You will see, and your textbook is guilty of this, they call the basal nuclei, they call them ganglia. But technically, our terminology, it should be just nuclei. Oh, and grading labs from last week. Let me just ask this question real quick. One of these is a bird. The other one is a tube. Which one is in your ear? The one that ends in a T. Yep. And I think what happened here, and I just took off spelling rather than a whole word being wrong, even though they're obviously completely different words. The problem is duct tape. That's the tape that goes around ducts. And there's a brand name, they call it duck. And so it gets called duct tape, that gray tape that's holding the bumper onto your car. So I guess this is where that mistake came from, if I'm assuming. But I thought, oh, I better just clear that up. It's not a bird, it's a duck. Okay, questions about this? Now let me just at least get started. You already covered primary motor and sensor regions because we just had that lab on cutaneous receptors. Function of each lobe, and that is the gray matter. That's in your textbook. That's a straight up memorize it. Plus you had it in anatomy as well. And then, oh, and okay, I spell gray with an E. but gray with an A is often there too. This would have come from the textbook, and then I spelled gray with an E. Both are correct. And one's not even British, so I don't know where that came from. And then you also have how the central nervous system develops embryologically as well as from an evolutionary point of view too. So we move on then. We're going to look at association areas. So this is the cerebrum, and you got that straight in anatomy, cerebrum versus cerebellum. The cerebrum makes up 83% of the brain for humans, and we have the biggest proportion of cerebrum as compared with any other animal. It's divided into lobes, frontal, temporal, parietal, occipital, and then in the middle here is the insula. We talked about this last week. Front side of the parietal lobe is primary somatosensory. Back side of the frontal lobe, that's primary motor area. The reason why I'm doing this is because instructions are coming from back side of my frontal lobe. And then we make sense of the sensory information, and we coordinate the motor information. Make sure that it all is working right. So now looking at somatosensory association cortex, notice, okay, the dark blue, that's where the stimulus is actually coming in. And this light blue is going, okay, there's a poking coming from the top of my left hand, and given that I can feel that my right arm is moving, this must be coming from my right hand. So that's where this light blue is picking up information, making sense of what it feels. Same thing down here. Notice we have primary visual cortex. All that my eyes, my retina, is relating back to my brain are colors and shapes. That's it. But the rest of this light blue is doing the, oh, these are people. Let's tap into my frontal lobe. These people are familiar to me. So these are students, and I'm standing in front of the classroom teaching. There we go. I'm fully oriented. Hey, that's important. Then we have multimodal association areas where we make sense of a lot of additional information. So let's talk about these. Prefrontal cortex, this is the part that's up under in the front of the frontal lobe. This is where you are who you are. This is where your personality, your judgment, your conscience, this is where all of that rests. And it does not develop completely until you are 25, if you are a woman, 30 if you are a man. Which means you are not mature, you're not a grown-up, until you are at least 25. And you know that either maybe from your own past or from younger people you know. There's a tendency to look, not look before you leave, there's just leaping. And there's slamming doors and screaming, I hate you. Someone who's flying off the handle all the time, someone who exhibits poor judgment, does not have a fully formed prefrontal cortex. 25, they figured that out a long time ago, even when they wrote the Constitution. So that's why you can't be a senator till you're 25, you can't be president till you're 35. We just want to be sure that your brain is fully mature before we put you in that position. Little concerned about some of the current candidates. Actually, there's a little mental illness going on in there too, unfortunately.
Today's voting day, by the way.
Today is the
Everybody go
primary.
vote.
Thank you for reminding me. I will be doing that after work. This is why you can't rent a car until you're 25. It's why your car insurance is so high until you're 25. Unfortunately, we can put a gun in your hands when you're 18. In some states, Wyoming, all you have to do is walk in as an 18-year-old and buy a gun. So that's why there's a concern about letting guns be carried on campuses, because we have mostly people whose prefrontal lobes are not fully mature, who do not have that judgment about thinking about the consequences of your actions before you pull a trigger. And you knew this one from anatomy, Finney's gauge, railroad worker who got a spike through the front of his head. All right, we know that these two sides are connected via the corpus callosum. The right side, the right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere of the cerebrum are connected via the corpus callosum. Again, what you remember from anatomy. The right side of the brain handles stuff on the left side of the body, and vice versa. Right, it's also handling stuff from the right ear and half of the visual field from the right eye, the other half from the left eye, because the optic nerves cross. It's called the optic chiasm. But then there are some specializations. So The left side is handling abstract thought, logic, math, that sort of thing. The right side is handling music, art, color, that, as I just did that. The right side of the brain was paying attention to where my hands were.
So we need to learn how to tap into the opposite side of our brains. Could we do that?
Oh, we are already. We are already tapping into both. We're using both sides all the time because of an intact corpus callosum. If it's intact, we are using it all the time. So there is some specialization that they found out, particularly with damage. That's how they learned initially how all parts of the brain work. So somebody would get a blow to the left side of the head and they can no longer speak. Well, then the speech center must be on the left side. They do the reason why that's split like that, oh, well, let me ask you this real quick. What color is that?
Green.
Color?
Red.
But your right and left brains were screaming at each other.
Mm-hmm.
The right brain was saying, that is green, and the left brain was saying, but it says blue.
I'm more wrong.
So
I didn't think about it.
we do have a little bit of duplication and we have specialization. So in the case of intractable epilepsy, where seizures cannot be controlled, there is a surgery of last resort, which is splitting the corpus callosum. So actually cutting the corpus callosum keeps a seizure event on one side of the brain and does not allow it to take over both sides. So let me show
So
you.
what if they have seizures on both sides of the brain?
It starts on one and then zips over to the other.
Okay, gotcha.
Most of